Ah yes, the long-awaited Kia Stinger review. This is the GT2 trim level with all-wheel drive. And if you take a look up there, you're gonna see at $52,000 or thereabouts, that is a big ask for this car. Now the good thing is if you peel back a lot of the fluff, you strip out all-wheel drive, you can have the twin-turbo version of this car with rear-wheel drive for $38,000, which is still a lot, but it's more in line with what this car is. But as soon as you add things like the premium audio, the 8-inch touchscreen, and things like all the safety systems, you're adding another $6,000 on, and that's too much to swallow. Now let's get on to the interior. You've already seen the exterior montage. There's a good mix of materials in here. From the alloys in the door, the leather on the door, the plastics are silver, the alloys for the grille surrounds for the speaker or the mid-range speaker, and then all throughout this cabin, the center grills have this matte alloy plastics and the kind of the matte silver everywhere. There's no plastic chrome, and there's a absolute minimal use of glossy black plastic. Now there is some, but it's not over the top except around the shifter, which is of course where it gets all disgusting. Okay, so I'm gonna get this out of the way. The biggest problem with this car is the Kia branding. And I know what you're saying, that's so short-sighted. Everybody says the same thing, but it wasn't too long ago they were making vehicles like the Kia Spectra, okay? And a lot of the mainstream buying public hasn't moved on from those days, and they're trying to make this an upscale product. And Kia is known for, one of the best things that Kia does is they combine vehicles with a little bit of character, performance, quality, technology without bending you over. And this is a deviation to it. And if you have $50,000+ to spend on a car, 9 out of 10 times somebody's going to choose an established luxury brand like BMW, Audi, Lexus, and in many cases, those cars may not even be as good as the Stinger, but that's the reality of this. And I kind of feel mixed about this because I'm a huge fan of a car like the Optima. It does so many things so well. It's one of the best mid-sized cars in the market, and it's totally underrated. And this is exactly the same problem the Stinger is going to have. People are going to overlook it. So let's talk about the pros and cons of this interior space. The biggest thing for me is there is a really good use of physical controls. There's just the right amount of physical controls to make everything work. Your steering wheel buttons are easy and logically laid out. Your center LCD cluster is logically laid out. You have analog gauges on the left and right side. I mean, you basically get in here and know how to use it right away, and that's a big pro to this. Your center stack area has all physical controls for your infotainment, and of course, there are, this has a touch screen, so you can operate it that way. Your HVAC controls are some of the simplest of any car, but they don't allow you to see the temperature down here. You have to use the screen, and even when you have the screen turned off, it turns it on to show you what temperature it is. So that basically, you're tied to using the infotainment to have the HVAC controls working. The next huge pro about this vehicle is just they use so many different types of materials that you're kind of surprised by it. And, it's the way that there is some stitching, some attempts at attention to detail here that you don't find in cars, well, in the mid $30,000 price range, although people are catching up. The headliner material feels pretty good. You have LED interior lighting. I mean, most everything here is pretty upscale overall, but I gotta tell you, when you see it in pictures, it looks better than it really is in person. And I'm gonna tell you why. Your lower plastics look totally budget, which isn't totally uncommon, but it's so weird how there's such a spread of like, oh, here's some premium materials, oh, here's junk that we would put in a $12,000 car. The worst part about it is this stupid screen. This has to be, aside from the gloss black plastic, sticking a screen up here, I know it's line of sight, this looks so cheesy and generic because there's a massive bezel around it. There's no attempt at style at all. The screen is only, there's about an 1 or 3-inch bezel around the whole side. It just looks cheap. It looks like somebody just glued a tablet up here. I hate this so much when you could easily integrate this in the dash. But, again, design trends. Overall, the red color in here is really stylish. It's really grabbing when you look at it. The seats are superbly comfortable. The heating and cooling feature works well. Mostly all the controls are the highlight of this car. Now here's the counterpoint to all that. I'm going to complain about some of the cheesiness of the interior styling, the screen stuck on the dash, the copycatting they do with some of the vent work. The exterior is definitely a copy and paste job from premium cars, but Kia does it extremely well. They choose some of the best parts of other cars or other brands and implement it. And that's a huge pro because you're getting premium level or luxury car levels of stuff in here at a lower price point. And it's true, you are getting that. And comfort is a big thing. This is an extremely comfortable space. Front and back seats, you have a ton of room in here. You have great headroom, hip room, shoulder room. You know, that's what this is about. It's not a sports car, although they're trying to sell it as being a performance car, which we'll get into later. But I think you're gonna love driving this around. If you have to have a sedan hatch, this is pretty kick-ass. Now here we go. Love it or hate it, you hear it a lot. The rear end of the Stinger, and it's a hatchback, and that's what makes the styling so weird on this car. But I'm going to tell you something, I love it, and I love it because this is a massive cargo space. It makes this car totally usable, and then when you look at it from the side and the back, you can tell they lifted some styling from cars like the Panamera or Maserati, and it works really good. I've never bought a sedan, ever. And that's because I don't understand the point of sacrificing style to have 4 doors and then not have a ton of cargo space. There's no fucking release. This to me makes a hell of a lot more sense, and it doesn't look totally boring while doing it. If you have a ton of cargo, I dare you not to try to get in here and fit everything you need. It's almost CUV levels of usability. Now, let's head into the shop, take a look at the technical aspects, and then go for a drive. Welcome to the In the Shop segment underneath the Kia Stinger twin-turbo V6 and all-wheel drive option. I was extremely curious to see the underbody of this car ever since this was announced because it's kind of platform sharing with the G80 and it has been shrunk down a bit. Now, Albert Bierman, who is the head of vehicle performance for Kia and Hyundai, says this doesn't share a lot with the G80. And I asked Kia what specifically was changed and I didn't get a straight answer. But after looking at this, we've done 2 G80 videos, the G80 Sport, which has the same motor and trans as this, and the G80 V6 and V8. So I know really what that looks like. So basically, this whole front end is different, and you see it right in the suspension design. They retain the split lower control arms to a dual lower ball joint setup, and that's for direct steering, and it does have an aluminum knuckle design. Now, what's different is they did away with double wishbone suspension, and now you have a strut. And depending on what model you get, you either get electronically adjustable dampers or without it. And honestly, this ties rebound and compression together, and it can vary itself based on your driving mode, or it can be a little bit adaptive. From driving this, I'm going to say it right off the bat, I don't think that it's worth it. It's not a big enough change in driving comfort versus sport to justify the cost. So if you're looking to save money, it's not that big of a deal. This has Brembo's pretty much stock, and it does have brake ducts here, or well, they're kind of kick-ups that just help direct air to this dust shield to cool off the rotors. The other thing you're going to see is there are vibration isolators on the strut body themselves up top, and you can see kind of where I'm pointing at. And you know, there is some attempts here to smooth out airflow, reduce road noise, and then reduce vibration as well, because this is supposed to be a Grand Touring machine, not a sports car. In the middle of the vehicle, you see the transfer case, you see the 8-speed automatic transmission, and I believe this is on its 3rd revision now, and it has been shrunk down since the 1st generation model. Now this is a rear-wheel drive architecture first, with all-wheel drive slapped on later. So that's a cool feature. You have an aluminum transmission cradle and then dual exhaust all the way back. Now the middle half of the Stinger is as close to the G80 as you're going to find. And then you get back here and you can tell basically this whole section has been lobbed off and redone. The subframe carrier is different. The suspension multi-link design is different. The control arms are slightly different. You have a stamped steel carrier or subframe carrier. All your lower control arms are stamped steel, and the only aluminum that's back here is your upper control arm and your knuckle design. Now, the other thing you're gonna notice is there's not as much use of underbody panels, and there's a lot less direction of airflow compared to the G80. So it flows over here. You do have this kind of director, but then you get to this back section and there's absolutely no attempts at undercoating, you know, sound reduction. It's just a wide open panel. And I think this is one of the reasons why this vehicle is a lot noisier than the G80, and they don't make the attempts here. And that's part of the cost cutting that they've done to get this to a price point. Changing the front half of the suspension, it's easier for packaging, easy for assembly, all of that, and then reducing all the little things that you do to a vehicle to help with reducing vibration, noise, all that. That's all been stripped away here in favor of reducing costs. Now, there is a benefit, two things here if you're gonna modify this, and I'm assuming at this price point people are gonna modify it. The exhaust is not integrated to the exhaust tip, so you could change the muffler and probably the exhaust and still keep the factory look with the bumpers. So that's kind of a pro if you want to keep a factory look, but change the exhaust. The other thing is you have camber and toe adjustment, obviously toe adjustment, but you do have camber adjustment in the back. So something to note. Let's take a look under the hood. Now, before I talk about the engine, it's time to talk about the weight and balance of the Kia Stinger. And I want to redirect for a second. Just because I'm talking about constantly what they have stripped away from this architecture does not mean that it's a bad car. It doesn't mean anything really other than, hey, they're trying to make this more affordable for people, real people, of course. And when you look at the weights, it's far less weight than the Genesis G80 is at 4,140 pounds. It also has an incredibly good cross weight, about 51.4%. So basically your left and your right weight, you need it to be as close to 50% as possible, and it's extremely close, which means you're gonna have better and more consistent turning left to right, and dynamically turning, it's going to feel, well, more natural or neutral. Now, the motor is the highlight of the Stinger. I would absolutely, unless you were broke and you had to have this car, I wouldn't have it any other way but the twin turbo V6. This is one of Hyundai's best motors in terms of performance. It's smooth, it's tuned well. There's no weirdness in programming. It feels very powerful, almost like a naturally aspirated motor, but with that thrust of the turbos. Now, yes, it does heat soak a little bit, of course, like all turbo cars when you beat on it back to back, but this is an extremely fun car to drive. And then Hyundai finally and Kia finally have programmed their 8-speed automatic to perform properly. And this is something where they have the Genesis beat here. The transmission performance is great compared to, and I mean, if transmission performance and speed is what you want mated to this motor, this is the car for you, absolutely. Now, let's get into the driving segment. And I just want to say this, I'm going to cut this review a little bit shorter because I'm going to be doing the rear wheel drive of the Stinger, and I need to leave some on the table to talk about that. So let's take this for a drive and see how it is. Setting off in the brand new Kia Stinger GT2 all-wheel drive. In this weather, it's about 50 degrees. This car has so much traction. It's like, it's a non-issue with stability. And I had this in the snow, and yeah, it's a little bit squirrely, of course. But if you're somebody that's in an all-weather or all-season climate, you probably want to opt for all-wheel drive because this vehicle is lively once you get into more of the sport mode and other more modes like that. Now, one of the things that I noticed immediately getting into this vehicle, and this is one of the biggest problems with it, is there are so many creaks and rattles in here. The door panels creaking, the rear deck or rear seats are rattling, the moonroof is rattling, and I know this is probably your first generation or first year build. I really hope that they fix some of this stuff because it is super annoying for a vehicle like this. Namely, when you get out of the G80 that is like dead silent for the most part. You know that they're capable of getting this all buttoned up, but it's just not. Now I'm going to come to a stop here, and I have traction and stability control off, and I'm taking manual control of the transmission, and I'm going to see just how this thing kind of gets off the line and if it puts its power down. Oh, interesting. All right. The first and annoying thing about this is there's no true manual mode. You take over manual mode by pulling one of the paddles. And the worst thing is when you come to a stop, it just puts you back into D. You lose your first gear start, so you constantly have to re-click it going back into first gear. And the traction and stability control still kicks back in on the all-wheel drive model. Now, the other thing to talk about is the way that this vehicle handles over broken and shoddy pavement. And I do some pretty nasty pavement drives just to see how the dampers perform, either in comfort mode, sport mode, or adaptive. In the case of the Stinger, it's definitely more on the firm side. This is more on the sporty side. Even in comfort mode, you do feel a lot of the bumps. It does feel firm, but not. It's not nonsensical firm, but I wish that the adaptive dampers were better at going from soft to fully firm. There's not a lot of, there's not a huge difference between the comfort and the sport mode. Now I'm gonna come to a stop here and see how this gets off the line. I'm gonna put this in sport, and we're gonna try launch control. You put it in sport, traction stability off, hold down the brake and just peg the throttle, and then you should just take off like a bat out of hell. Manual mode, first gear. Okay, how does it feel? The twin turbo V6 on this is amazing, and I said the same thing on the G80 Sport. It's really almost the same identical experience to me. The biggest difference is the transmission tuning on here is way better. When you're in Sport with the stability and traction control off, it allows you to hold revs. The transmission will bang off the rev limiter, and I'll give you a quick example of that. And that's something that the G80 Sport would not do no matter what mode you were in, and it was super annoying. But again, you have to have the traction and stability control off and pretty much in Sport to enjoy that benefit. Now, the upshifts and downshifts are really quick. So I'll just pull a couple gears so you can see third, second, first. And you can tell the 8-speed automatic in here has it's a very versatile transmission. Now they can program it in a more performance car manner, and it can operate almost like a luxury car. And I think that's going to be a huge pro for a lot of people that are going to buy this, because you can really drive it. It's so smooth. It is, luxury car-like, and then you can kind of pound on it. Now, I wish it was quicker. It's not as quick as the ZF 8-speed or even the Lexus, like the RCF transmission. But I think for most people, you're not going to find any offense with this because you can ignore it because the engine is so good. Now, in terms of handling, I've really beat this thing around, and it's one of the areas where I'm not a big fan of it, honestly. I thought this thing was going to be a lot more fun to drive, and there's a lot of dive, there's a lot of squat. You feel just the suspension overly soft under braking. Under turning, it doesn't set really well. It just has a lot of roll before it gets set. And I mean, it is confidence inspiring, but it's not as sporty as you would expect it to be. But most people, what they're gonna do with this is they're gonna just cruise it around. This is a straight up cruiser. I mean, it's got balls, don't get me wrong. You're gonna be smoking pretty much anybody off the line. When you get on the highway and pound this, you're gonna be looking down. You're like, holy crap, am I flying? And a lot of that same feeling came with the G80, but the G80 is a far more quiet, refined interior cabin. You can feel like it's put together better. I think there's more laminated glass or acoustic laminated glass in that, and you can't tell the speed at all. But in here, you get a little bit of the fake engine noise. It seems louder to me. There's more exhaust tone, which is hard to say. There's not a lot of exhaust tone, but because of the hatch in the back, you get more wind noise. You get more of a visceral sense of acceleration in the Stinger, and I think that's gonna be a huge attraction to a lot of people. I think it needs an exhaust. I hate to say it, but I think it does, and I think a lot of people are gonna do that, and probably some type of intake for this as well to bring it to life, because this motor has so much to offer. Final thoughts on the Kia Stinger GT2 all-wheel drive. Now, this is amazing that this is a first attempt for Kia at making a GT car. It shows that the people that are running the company have a good understanding of what they want to do here. They've created a lot of hype, a lot of interest in this, largely because of the looks. It's a rear-wheel drive platform that's attainable and affordable. That's a massive thing for people. We're constantly inundated with cars that are so expensive you can't afford it, and people lose interest in that. You could buy this. You can literally afford to buy it if you spec it out right. Now, I spent a lot of time talking about what this car's not. Let's talk about what it is. The pros are this. The engine. If you don't have enough money to get the twin-turbo V6, save your money for it, because this is how you own it. The second thing they've done right, finally, is the automatic transmission for a torque-converted unit finally performs quickly. It's not the greatest, it's not ZF, it's not BMW, Audi levels of performance, but in sport mode, well, there's no manual mode, but in sport mode, if you click the paddles, you turn off stability and traction, you literally have control of the transmission. It ups, shifts, and downshifts, it rev matches downshifts. It's great that you can take it from mundane to more performance and have some fun that way. It's a dynamic handling car. There's still some rotation feeling to it. It's not an understeer fest. Now granted, the stability control system does kick back in, but it is fun to drive and it is extremely quick in a straight line. A lot of fun to be in. The comfort is a high factor of this. It's got a great interior space. It's super comfortable. I love it at night. I love the ambient lighting. The backseat comfort's good. And then the hatchback. Really, this is what sells it. It's a usable car all year around. You can drive this every day. You don't have to have a second car. You don't have to park this and worry. You can pile crap in it like it's a CUV, pile people in it, and just enjoy it for what it is. Spend your money and enjoy it. Now, the negatives are this. They've had to sacrifice a lot here to keep the costs down. He stripped out double wishbone suspension for struts in the front. You got rid of the reinforced alloy strut towers. The rigidity's not there. The sound isolation's not there. The overall solidness of the interior. This thing has rattles and creaks, and it's totally unacceptable. Honestly, I mean, for a press car, it should not have that issue. It's only got about 5,000 miles on it. But I understand this is like, a first batch of production. So maybe they'll fix these issues in fit and finish. Now the last negatives are, there's some cheesiness here, and I can't stand it. Fake hood vents, I mean, come on, really, why? I mean, they did this on the Veloster, and then they got rid of it for the last model year, second to last model year. They got smart, but now they're doing it here on a car that shouldn't have it. The stuck-on screen on the dashboard, some of the monotony and material colors and choices, it's some blandness in there. But overall, this is a pretty cool car. I can't wait to see what Kia does with this and to drive the rear-wheel drive version of it. Take care.